Hey, this is Chris. Welcome to part 2 of our video series on making podcasts in Garageband. This video will focus on doing the recording and some basic editing. Now that we have our Garageband window all set up the way we like it, ready to get started to record. If your students have if you have multiple tracks set up for multiple characters, maybe in a story, you always want to make sure you have selected the right track before you record. You can tell which one is selected because it's a slightly lighter color, like now I've selected Sue, and now I've selected narrator. If you only have one track because you only have one student speaking, then you don't have to worry about that. But just so you know, pick the right track. Once you've selected the right track, you can do a little microphone check here. If you notice as I speak, this green bar is sort of bouncing. I always have the kids do this as a little microphone check, make sure the internal microphone is working, and also to have a little conversation about speaking loudly and clearly into your computer. A lot of our kids can be a little shy, and sometimes they try to talk like this, and it doesn't pick up very well on the microphone. And you can tell that the green bar sort of fades down to the bottom. Occasionally, there are some boisterous people who also talk really loud, and you can tell that it gives good feedback here. It starts to go yellow and maybe even red if they're speaking too loudly, and they can adjust this volume slider depending on which problem they're having. So do a mic check. Make sure it's right about where it's set right now. It's a good space, good place for it. Now that you have your microphone ready to go, you're ready to record. There's two ways you can start recording. This red button here at the top, or you can push the letter R on the keyboard. Either way will work. I'll do it here with the red button, and it immediately starts to record, and you see the red box forms and the little wavelengths for my speech. And when I'm done recording, I'll press the space bar. A little tip here, I always give a big speech to the students about being gentle with the space bar. Sometimes they'll be recording like this, and they'll say their lines, whatever they want to say, and when they're done, they smack the space bar. And as you can tell, you can hear that, and no one wants to listen to that. They smack the space bar. Right, so that can be really distracting if you hear that at the end of every recording. Now, of course, you can go back in here and edit it, and you can remove that noise from the space bar, but it'll save you those steps if they just are gentle on the space bar in the first place. Once you've got some recordings here, you can see these little bubbles represent each recording, and since these are two separate recordings, this can be moved. So if I accidentally had recorded on the wrong track, I can move it up here to Bob, or I could move it apart and do a new recording in here. I can rearrange the order. You can click and drag these however you want. And each one represents one recording that we did. And to listen to them, you use your playhead, which is this line right here with this little triangle gizmo. Move it to where you want, and then spacebar will play. Record, and you see the red box forms and the little... Okay, so I can jump over here with the playhead. And they'll say their lines, whatever they want to say, and when they're done, they smack the spacebar. Okay. Now, as you notice, if I do more and more recordings, you can imagine eventually this starts to scroll off the screen. And you can see that right now I can't, it's eventually going to become difficult to see all the recordings on one screen. That's when the zoom tool up here can be handy. You see it says horizontal zoom. It's this little slider. Right now it's all the way to pretty much all the way to the left. But I can zoom in this way and I can zoom back out this way. And it just changes the view. It does not change how long the recording is. It just it's changing the increments of what we can view at one time. So that's handy sometimes for students to zoom in and out. You want to zoom in if you want to see more detail. If you want to see the whole project, maybe you decide that one recording you do at the end, you want to move all the way to the beginning. It helps if you can see the whole recording in one go. So like I can move this thing from Sue here to the beginning. Actually, here we go. As you can imagine, eventually this starts to scroll off the screen. Okay, there is another keyboard. So if I wanted to maybe go in and do some editing on that space bar that I could hear right there, I'm zooming in with the slider. And you can see right there, that little wavelength. We can listen to it. It goes pretty fast because we're zoomed in. There we go. Yep. So that's the part I want to get rid of. That right there is the click from the space bar. And the way you do that is you hold your mouse over here at the end, and see how it's changed to a two-headed arrow there with a little kind of a bracket thing? That's how you can trim this recording. And I'm clicking, and I'm going to drag to the left until it just cuts off that noise. And now when I play, you don't hear the spacebar clicking on the recording. So that's one little editing thing there. If you want to trim the end, I think it works at the beginning too. Let's go over here. Let me zoom out. I'm zoomed in too closely. Zoom. All right. I think we can do that. There we go. Yep, we can trim the beginning too. Maybe if somebody coughs or there's or there's just a big space. Like that. See that? Like right here, I've got a little space before I start speaking, and maybe I don't want that. I can just trim it by hovering my mouse on the end until it turns to that two-headed arrow, and click and drag it in, and it just trims some of that dead space off. Okay. So that's trimming. You can do that at the beginning or the end. Another thing that's sometimes helpful is if you want to repeat something. This recording here that I've done, if you move your mouse more towards the top, you see it turns to like a looping arrow. I can click and I can drag that. And what it's doing is duplicating the recording here. So it just will replay. Recordings, you can imagine eventually this starts to scroll off the screen. Recordings, you can imagine eventually this starts to scroll off the screen. So it's just a duplicate. It just copies the original recording twice. This is great for like sound effects or noises and you want them to repeat over and over again. You just use this little trick. Hover your mouse in the corner until you see the looping arrow, click and drag it. That one does not work at the beginning, only the end. When you play these back, sometimes you'll have them maybe overlapping. Let's pretend that, I don't know, maybe this is happening in the background, like a sound effect, and then we have a line being spoke by Sue, and we want to listen to them. And if we move our playhead here and hit play, so you could hear that it's playing both of these tracks at the same time. Maybe that's what you want, but maybe just to listen to it, you don't want to hear them both. And you can use these controls here. If you use the headphones icon, that is to, it says solo, and now when I hit play, it will only play the Sue track. Recordings, you can imagine it. And I don't hear the narrator track. You can notice here the flashing speaker icon with a line through it. It's because the other tracks are muted because we're only listening to Sue. And I can turn that off by clicking the headphones again. I can also mute these tracks individually if I want to mute narrator and Sue and only be able to listen to Bob right now. Right now there is no recording on Bob, but if there were, I could hear it and only it. This is good for just playing back your project to sort of like quality control, to check and see how it sounds. You'd in the final project, obviously, you'd want to turn all that off and you'd want to hear everything. Right. So that's a couple things you can do with the different tracks. If you get a recording, like let's say this one, and you decide that maybe it's for my speech, you don't like this part right here in the middle where I have a little sniffle, right? We want to get rid of that. You can do that by splitting this recording and removing that part. I'm going to show you how to do that. First, you get your playhead where you want, right before the little sniffle there. And we're going to go up here to Edit and Split Regions at the playhead. If you prefer keyboard shortcuts, you can also do Command T. Right, and now it's made this two separate recordings. So then I can move my playhead to the end of this section that we don't want. And I'm going to use that keyboard shortcut, Command T. And so now I have three sections. I took the one recording and we split it into three sections. I'm going to select the middle one, which is the part that I don't want. And I'm just going to hit delete on my keyboard. And now it's gone. And I can slide this recording up next to the other one. And it's just like that little middle part never happened. Speech, and when I'm done recording, see, it just flows right into the next one. And if you like the way that works and you want to, you can combine these two back together. I'm going to select one. You can see it has the white around the top. And I'm going to hold Shift and select the second one. Now they're both selected. And you can tell because they both kind of have this white frame around them. And I'm going to go up to Edit, and I'm going to go Join Regions, or Command J if you like keyboard shortcuts. Okay, so now it's joined it together as one. and it'll play just my speech. And when I'm done recording, you can't even tell that we did some editing there. So that's how you can remove, you can split a clip or join clips back together. Another thing sometimes people want to do is adjust the volume throughout a recording. Like maybe if you have two students speaking and one of them speaks very quietly and the other one speaks very loud, or if at some point in the recording they change the volume of their speech, you can do some editing to save that. And you do that with this little automation button right up here where it says show or hide automation. We're going to click that to make it active. You can tell it's yellow. And that gives you this little button here on the track, and now I've got volume. There's some other options here, mostly for music though. I'm going to stick with volume right now. And I can go in here and start clicking, which creates these levels. So I'm going to say, for Sue, we want it to start out here, but then maybe along here somewhere we'd like it to get quieter. So I'm going to double click, which creates another point. And this is the volume level, so this is a fade down. It's not quite what I was going for. There we go. So I'm going to double click and create another point. So this volume level is stable, and then right here it fades down. And it'll be quieter. Let's listen to
Screen recordings.
Let's try that again.
Eventually this starts to scroll off the screen. Recordings, you can imagine eventually
So you can tell up here is a little louder, down here is a little softer. I could make it even softer, by adjusting this however I wanted. It's just a neat little tool if there are parts of your recording that you need to make louder or softer. Good for background music. If you add some music and background music and someone's going to be speaking, you want to make sure that the volume of the music is lowered so that we can hear the speaker clearly. But then when the speaker stops, you might want the music to get a little louder, and that's what this can be helpful for. You can adjust the volume. And to make more points, you just double click and it creates another point that you can then manipulate. So you can have the volume doing all kinds of crazy things. And that is called automation, and it's hiding under this little guy right here. You can turn that all back off, you can turn it back on. Okay, I think that covers the basics of how to go about recording your audio and doing a little bit of editing. The next video will go into some more advanced editing features that you can spice up your project with.